The story of the origin of humans is very much an evolving story, with new discoveries every few years challenging what researchers had once believed. One of the biggest questions that has still not been answered is, when did Homo sapiens first appear? The answer has changed over the 20th century, from Israel to Ethiopia to South Africa and then back to Ethiopia again, after older and older fossils were found. However, all of these finds pale in comparison to the actual oldest human fossils ever found. Not only did they challenge the idea of when we evolved, but they suggest we were very wrong about where we evolved. Today's story starts in 1961, 562 meters above sea level in the Moroccan mountains. Extensive mining operations were underway all across the landscape in pursuit of barite, a mineral that is the main source of the element barium. While searching in a small cave, a miner noticed something strange sticking out of its wall, a hominin skull. He then proceeded to excavate it before passing it on to an engineer who gave it to the University of Rabat. Caves are pretty common across the region due to the abundance of limestone, which covers most of Morocco. Coincidentally, limestone is also great at preserving fossils, as the many layers of sediment protect them. Soon after the cave's discovery, scientists recognized that it was once much larger, likely having been eroded away over time. Today the site is known as Jebel Irhoud, and once the first skull had been examined, researchers visited the cave in hopes to uncover more. Within the first year, the remains of 30 different mammal species had been exhumed. And whilst this would have been a success in and of itself, it was the hominin fossils that caught their attention. Specifically, they found the bones of one adult and one child, which definitely belonged to a member of the Homo genus. Based on the stone tools found at the site, they concluded that they had most likely come from Neanderthals. If they were correct, this would have been the first evidence of Neanderthals in Africa, meaning they would have had to have crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. Another much more recent expedition in 2004 led to the discovery of 5 more individuals. It was then that the archaeologists realized that they weren't looking at Neanderthals, but instead their own species, Homo sapiens. The reason it took them so long to realize was partially because they held archaic human features which we have lost since then. This, combined with the type of tools found, pointed them towards Neanderthals. So clearly these remains are old, but how old exactly? Well, unfortunately, since they had been there for so long, with high temperatures degrading them, researchers were unable to directly date the fossils themselves. However, based on the kinds of animals found alongside them, scientists have suggested a date of 160,000 years ago. Whilst impressive, especially this far north, this date was still far younger than the oldest remains from East Africa. Still, their ancient date and location led researchers to hypothesize that they were either an archaic form of Homo sapiens or a human-Neanderthal hybrid. At the time of their discovery, the oldest human fossils were found in Omo Kibish, Ethiopia, which were believed to have been 195,000 years old, though today their date has been pushed back to 233,000 years old. Not long after, however, researchers in Germany found a much more reliable way to date the Jebel Irhoud remains. Some of the tools these humans left behind were burned, likely as fuel to keep the fire going after they had become degraded. Using thermoluminescence dating, scientists could pinpoint when these tools were burned, and in turn how old the fossils were. The analysis left them stunned, as it revealed that the tools were burned 315,000 years ago. These numbers are further backed up by the human jawbone, known as a mandible, which dated to between 280 and 350,000 years ago. Using the approximate date of 315,000 years ago means that the Jebel Irhoud remains are the oldest human fossils by 82,000 years, completely redefining our evolutionary timeline. The fossils don't necessarily indicate a Moroccan origin of humans, however, as the sample size from that time is just one. It would be foolish to make any conclusions. However, the remains do debunk the theory that Homo sapiens appeared in the Rift Valley around 200,000 years ago. Instead, it is likely that we evolved across a wide area of Africa, with migrations making it hard to trace our exact origin. Since the cave's discovery, 22 hominin fossils have been discovered, with many more likely awaiting discovery. Their exact placement on the human evolutionary tree is hard to decipher, given that we don't have their DNA, though it's safe to say they don't have any living descendants today. As with all humans who lived that long ago, there are some clear morphological differences between us. Most noticeable are their large mandibles and elongated posterior brain cases. Both of these features cause them to bear a close resemblance to the South African Florizabad skull. Dated to 260,000 years ago, it was soon identified as belonging to a modern human after the Jebel Irhoud remains were dated. Interestingly, many of the Jebel Irhoud remains had thick brow ridges reminiscent of Neanderthals. However, an equal number didn't, indicating that this feature may have varied between men and women. Their elongated brain case is also interesting, as it suggests that the difference in our brains from other humans evolved much more recently than previously thought, with the different shape indicating different functions. And just like all other mid-Pleistocene humans, their teeth were much larger than ours, though their shapes are very similar. To learn more about how these people lived, we can look at the assemblages of stone tools which they used. Of the many tools, scrapers were by far the most common, used for things like cleaning animal hides or cutting. They also seem to have made good use of piercers, useful for making clothes, cooking, and more. The raw materials used to make all their tools were flint, quartzite, and quartz, with the majority being made of flint. Researchers traced the source of these materials to a site called Jebel Irhoud, sitting at a distance of over 30 kilometers away. These people either moved, taking their tools with them, or perhaps more likely they sought out particular types of rocks to make tools. These rocks could have also been traded with whoever's territory controlled Jebel Irhoud, although this is speculation. But whilst you can learn a lot about a group of hominins based on the tools they left behind, the animals they hunted also reveal a wealth of information, because humans were hardly the only animals whose bones have been found at Jebel Irhoud. Among the most common herbivores are gazelles, wild boars, and relatives of the wildebeest. The vast majority were brought into the cave by people, as indicated by their cut marks. In fact, only one gazelle bone shows evidence of being chewed by a carnivore. They also show breaking patterns more consistent with fresh kills rather than scavenging. However, herbivores were not the only victims of these people, as the remains of jackals, small cats, hyenas, leopards, and even lions have also been found in the cave. Unfortunately, the ancient isotopes of their teeth have not yet been studied, meaning we don't know what kind of plants they were eating. Many rodent fossils were found too, however they were likely deposited by owls based on the kinds of species found there. Clearly, species like birds and more voles were abundant though, suggesting that at the time grassland covered much of the surrounding landscape. This idea is also supported by climatic models, which suggests the region was much warmer and much more humid than it is today. These fossils have really taught us a lot about our origin, though hopefully they are just the beginning. It is without a doubt that future discoveries will continue to change the way we view human evolution. And if you want to stay up to date on all things paleontology, why don't you consider subscribing? And I'll see you in the next one.